Hey, this is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. We're going to pick up with unit number 13. We've been talking about presidents in America from Nixon through Clinton. Today we're going to be talking about Ronald Reagan, the conservative president of the United States of America, will be elected in 1980. What we'll do is start with the three unit-focused questions, and once again, we won't answer these questions right now, but at the end of the unit, we will address them. Number one, what effect did the Nixon presidency have on America's public psyche? Two, why did conservatism become such an attractive political philosophy in the United States? And number three, describe the effect of technology and scientific innovation on the increased globalization of the United States. We have our vocabulary. Do as we tell you to do. Take out your journals, write down these terms and define them yourself. And as they come up in the lesson, what we'll try to do is address as many of them as we can. All right, we do have three lesson-focused questions that we will address at the end of the lesson. It says identify and describe Reagan's economic policy. What was Reagan's response to the growing deficit during his presidency? And three, what was the basis of Reagan's foreign policy? Now, we will address those at the end, of course, this lesson. Journal topic, take out your journals, write down the following question and topic, and we'll come back on the other side and see what you think. But what you should see is incumbents for president usually win their quest for to be reelected president. Why do you think Reagan was able to defeat the incumbent president, Jimmy Carter, in the election of 1980 in an absolute landslide? And both houses of Congress shifted to Republican control. And as we said, take a few moments, and we'll see you on the other side, and we'll discuss. Usually, incumbent presidents win re-election. It has to be something that has to go real bad sideways in most cases for an incumbent president to lose a re-election bid. And that's exactly what happened in 1980 with Jimmy Carter. And there were several things, of course, that kind of contributed to that loss. And we'll talk about some of them in more depth as we go. But to give you a couple of highlights, the Iranian hostage crisis, 444 days, of course, where Americans were held in Iran. We're going to look at inflation, of course, not being addressed. So, and then, of course, people will see Carter as kind of a soft touch, of course, when it comes to handling the Soviet Union and China. So when we look at those factors, it kind of gives an idea why this incumbent president is not reelected. And it also happens that a very strong Republican candidate emerges, too. And we'll talk about all that, of course, in some detail. Reagan's 1980 campaign slogan, Reagan does win the election in 1980, and he ran under the slogan, "Let's make America great again, Reagan 1980. Some people, of course, have heard that and thought it was some other guy that said that, but it really wasn't. It started in 1980 with Ronald Reagan. The Reagan presidency in 1980, Republican Ronald Reagan defeated Jimmy Carter, bolstered with policy suggestions from the Conservative Heritage Foundation. At the heart of Reagan's domestic program was supply-side economics, which would be called Reaganomics, which he believed would end stagflation, which plagued Carter, one of the reasons why Carter wasn't reelected. Reagan would lower taxes and deregulate businesses, all conservative Republican ideas that would lead to savings and profit for businesses that he believed would trickle down to workers in the form of higher wages and benefits. And that's what Reaganomics was, of course, about. It was about trickle-down economics. If you helped out businesses, of course, by deregulating them and cutting taxes on them, they'd make more money. And by making more money, they'd hire more workers, pay higher wages, so it would be a trickle-down effect. And that's what Reaganomics was all about. Cutting taxes led to the budget deficit in the United States, which Reagan ignored. Under Reagan, the federal budget deficit soared primarily because of defense spending and to guard against the Soviet Union. And recovery did happen, and the American economy did expand under Reagan. But it's just like anything else. At some point, you got to pay the piper. And that comes in the form of looking at the deficit that's created during the Reagan administration and then plagues the George H.W. Bush administration after Reagan. Here's a picture of Ronald Reagan. The president of the United States of America in 1980, one of the facts that Reagan, he was very comfortable in front of the cameras, always with a quick comeback. And one of the reasons primarily is because of his history. He was also an actor in the 1940s. As president, Reagan was able to shift the Supreme Court to the right, or to a more conservative approach, by appointing conservative justices Sandra Day O'Connor, who becomes the first lady to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, William Rehnquist, Anthony Kennedy, and Antonin Scalia. And once again, it was about shifting the, the American court, the American Supreme Court, in a more conservative manner. And by doing that, we can push American society to a more conservative, traditional approach. Though Reagan supported a constitutional amendment to end abortion, his Supreme Court took no action on Roe v. Wade, which is kind of surprising. But even though the court is at this particular point becoming more and more conservative minded, they don't take aim at one of the big liberal ideas that was created in 1973, of course, which was a court case of Roe v. Wade. Here is the picture of Sandra Day O'Connor, the first female to be appointed U.S. Supreme Court Justice. Reagan's foreign policy. Now, we talked a little bit about Reaganomics and how it was designed, of course, to do what, to make America, get out of stagflation and get the American economy going. Reagan was strongest in a lot of people's mind in terms of looking at his foreign policy approach. Reagan rejected détente that Nixon had created and instead favored peace through strength and oversaw the military buildup of the United States. It was because of this spending that the budget deficit grew from $80 billion to $200 billion during his presidency. The Reagan doctrine was used to undermine Soviet and communist influence by the United States covertly or outright, aiding and supplying nations around the world who opposed the Soviets, like the Afghans in Afghanistan, the Contras in Nicaragua, the rebels who were opposed to the communists in Grenada. Reagan's strength in foreign policy would lead to nuclear arms reduction and the eventual end of the Soviet Union, but scandals like the Iran-Contra affair would put a bit of a black eye on his presidency. Now, we'll tell you a little bit about the Iran-Contra scandal. And what happens basically is that the United States of America ended up engaging in some illegal arms sales, and the illegal arms sales ended up with profits that went to a nation that it shouldn't have gone. So the the arms sales should have taken place, and the country that received the money from the arms sales shouldn't receive the money. And one of the things that a lot of people blamed, one of the persons that get the blame for this and denies that the president had any knowledge of it was Colonel Oliver North, a Marine Corps colonel that in a lot of people's mind took the fall for that particular scandal. At this time, what we'll do is pause the video on the end of the Cold War and its impact on Europe and the United States. And as we said, Reagan, of course, was president of the United States of America, where this begins to kind of unfold. You can access the video from the lesson description. Upon reviewing the video, complete the activities which accompany the video, convert your work into a PDF and turn it into a teacher for a grade. Good luck and enjoy the video at this time. We hope you enjoyed that film, of course, on Ronald Reagan in terms of what his ideas were, of course, for ending the Cold War. And it even goes and shows you a little bit, of course, about the fall, of the Soviet Union. So it gives you some in-depth look, not only in terms of looking at Reagan's contribution, but also his predecessor, George H.W. Bush. At this time, what we'll do, of course, is we'll move a little bit further forward, and we should be able to start looking at those three lesson-focused questions that we have. Number one, identify and describe Reagan's economic policy. 2, what was Reagan's response to the growing deficit during his presidency? And 3, what was the basis of Reagan's foreign policy? Well, first, identify and describe Reagan's economic policy. Reagan was focused on supply-side economics or trickle-down economics, which you call Reaganomics. And it was aimed to lower, his aim was to lower taxes on businesses and individuals to encourage investment and job creation. And that success was to trickle down to the American worker. What was Reagan's response to the growing deficit during his presidency? He largely ignored it. He cut taxes, increased military spending, which increased the deficit. Though he preached fiscal conservatism, at the end of the day, the debt grew exponentially during his 2 terms as president. And that would be a bill that has to be paid by the United States of America during the presidencies of George W. Bush, and will be eventually handled by the Clinton administration in 1992 through 2000. What was the basis of Reagan's foreign policy? Reagan's foreign policy was known as the Reagan Doctrine. The Reagan Doctrine centered around a strong anti-communist agenda, leading to increased military spending and a confrontational approach toward the Soviet Union. Peace through strength was his motto. What we hope you were able to do is to gain some insights about Ronald Reagan, who for a lot of conservatives is the top guy, especially when you're talking about contemporary Republican politics. This is the guy that everybody points to because he gets stuff done. And not only that, he not only is the pioneer for conservatism, of course, in America, but he also is the one that challenges the Soviet Union. And by challenging the Soviet Union, a lot of people feel like that his efforts is what leads to the downfall of the Soviet Union. Hope you enjoyed today's lesson. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. History from 1877 to present. And remember what we always tell you, don't take my word for it. Do your own research, draw your own conclusion. And with that, we'll see you next time.